The screen is black. The sound of a distant echoing alarm grows louder. It's not frantic, but persistent, ominous. A slow-motion shot reveals an empty, sprawling office floor. Sunlight streams through dusty windows, illuminating rows of silent, unused desks. A single office chair spins slowly in the vast silence. This is not an abandoned building. This is a financial weapon of mass destruction. And in 2024, its timer is ticking down to 0. The scene quickly cuts to a montage. A for lease sign on a glass skyscraper. A dark, empty shopping mall with a lone fountain still trickling. A graph plummeting in red. This is the great commercial real estate collapse, and it is quietly unraveling the very fabric of the global economy. This is the story of how our offices, our malls, and our banks became the epicenter of the next great financial crisis. To understand the collapse, we must first understand the world we left behind. Rewind to 2019. City centers were pulsating with life. Office towers were temples of productivity, humming with activity. Commercial real estate was the bedrock of the global financial system, a seemingly infallible asset class. Then the world stopped. The lockdowns of 2020 forced a global experiment in remote work. What began as a temporary necessity unveiled a permanent truth. Companies realized their employees could be productive from home, and employees realized they preferred it. This was not a temporary shift. It was a fundamental, irreversible rupture. As the world reopened, a new reality set in. The 5-day office week was dead. Hybrid models became the standard. But this created a mathematical catastrophe for commercial real estate. An office building that is only half occupied on any given day doesn't need half the space. It needs far less. The demand for physical office space evaporated overnight. At the same time, another pillar was crumbling. The shopping mall, once the heart of American consumerism, was already on life support. E-commerce, supercharged by the pandemic, delivered the final blow. The result was a perfect storm. Vacancy rates began a relentless climb, soaring to historic highs. But the true crisis was hiding in plain sight on the balance sheets of the world's biggest banks. The scene shifts to the Federal Reserve Building. The year is 2022. Inflation is raging. In response, the Fed begins the most aggressive interest rate hiking cycle in decades. For commercial real estate, this was a death sentence. For over a decade, developers had feasted on cheap debt. They borrowed billions at near zero interest rates to build and acquire skyscrapers, malls, and hotels. Their business model was simple: borrow cheap, collect rent, and profit. But when interest rates skyrocketed, their world inverted. Those cheap loans were now becoming catastrophically expensive. Mortgages that needed to be refinanced suddenly had monthly payments that doubled or tripled. And at the exact same moment, their rental income was collapsing. They were being squeezed from both sides, with nowhere to run. The dominoes began to fall. First, it was the property developers. Giant firms like Brookfield and Blackstone started handing back the keys on prestigious properties, defaulting on massive loans. It was not a sign of weakness, but a cold, calculated business decision. The buildings were simply worth less than the debt on them. They were what Wall Street calls underwater. But the real shockwave was felt in the banking sector. Banks around the globe were sitting on over $1 trillion in commercial real estate loans. As defaults rose, the value of those loans on their books plummeted. We saw the first cracks with the collapse of New York Community Bank, a direct casualty of its exposure to souring office loans. In Germany, Deutsche Bank's stock tumbled on fears of its own massive real estate portfolio. The fear was contagious. Was this 2008 all over again? The answer is both yes and no. The scale is potentially larger, but the mechanism is different. This isn't a crisis about subprime mortgages given to homeowners. This is a crisis about prime loans given to skyscrapers. And the impact is more insidious. It's not just banks and developers. It's city budgets eviscerated by lost property taxes. It's pension funds, which had invested heavily in real estate, now facing catastrophic losses that threaten the retirement savings of millions. It's the small businesses that relied on office workers, from the coffee shops to the dry cleaners, now closing their doors for good. The collapse is creating ghost towns in the hearts of our greatest cities. So, what happens next? The screen shows a split image. On one side, a dilapidated office building, on the other, construction crews converting it into apartments. The path forward is one of painful adaptation. The only way out is a great conversion. Cities are now incentivizing the conversion of empty offices into residential housing, a complex and expensive process, but a necessary one. It is a race against time. Can we repurpose these obsolete assets before the debt crisis they trigger consumes the entire financial system? The alarm bell you heard at the beginning is still ringing. It is the sound of a global economy at a crossroads, a stark reminder that the physical spaces we build can become the source of our greatest economic vulnerabilities. The era of the office skyscraper as a premier financial asset is over. The reckoning has just begun.